All right, I see those numbers slowly ticking up, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's conversation. Welcome to another Mass Medical webinar. Today we have our friends with us from Deep Armor. My name is Nicole Owens. I am the Director of Marketing Communications for Mass Medic. If you're not familiar with us, we are a membership-based trade association for the medical device industry, and we work to bolster the industry through education and events like this. Advocacy, awareness, and connection. I do have a couple housekeeping notes before I turn it over for our great conversation today on cybersecurity and compliance readiness for your devices. We are recording this webinar, so everyone who registered for it will receive a copy of the recording after the event, and you'll also receive a copy of the slides. So we'll be sending those out a little later on. All right. Without further ado, I am pleased to turn it over to our moderator for today. Sumanth is the founder and CEO of Deep Armor, and he's going to lead our conversation today. Sumanth.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nicole. It's definitely a privilege to be here and addressing all of you. So today's conversation is about cybersecurity for healthcare and medical devices. So we're going to be talking about what that means from a product perspective, from a software perspective, and also from a compliance perspective, because being in the MedTech industry or the healthcare industry, this is one of the most heavily regulated verticals or a sector. So security compliance plays a very big role, especially if you're a hardware or a software manufacturer when it comes to healthcare and medical devices. All right, so let's dive in. So my name is Sumant Naropant. I'm the founder and CEO of Deep Armor and Gauntlet. These are two security companies based out of Bangalore in India. I have with me Sunil Kumar. He's the Associate Vice President of Security Research. He has quite a lot of coverage and background when it comes to cybersecurity for hardware, embedded systems, web applications, and so on. I also have with me Aishwarya Patel. She is a security analyst at Deep Armor, and she's been working on some really cutting-edge products and platforms when it comes to MedTech, as well as application security. A little bit about our companies. So Deep Armor has a team of security experts. We have done extensive product security assessments, automation, vulnerability assessments. We also work pretty extensively with the FDA cybersecurity guidance. So in fact, we have communicated with the Food and Drug Administration. We've also worked with the MITRE Corporation. And specifically, there is something called the MDDT, which is the Medical Device Development Test Tool. So this is a platform that allows companies like us to develop solutions, to develop platforms for doing cybersecurity for healthcare and medical devices. We're going to be touching upon that in one of our case studies. Sunil and I and many of our colleagues have also spoken at Black Hat. We have taught courses at Black Hat on IoT, as well as Bluetooth and wireless application security, and so on. And finally, as a company, we've been partnering with customers and businesses across the world, including in the United States, in India, Canada, Africa, Middle East, and so on, right from Fortune 50 companies to startups and mid-market. Gauntlet is a software platform. It basically unifies all things related to cloud, code, and AI security. Specifically, Gauntlet has been built, fine-tuned for MedTech as well, although Gauntlet is also used by all other verticals. So we provide compliance for the Food and Drug Administration's 21 CFR, or the privacy and protection of health records. We also provide compliance for GDPR, for HIPAA, and more than other 20 regulatory and security compliances. Gauntlet is a qualified software. We are an APN partner, an Amazon partner, and it's also available on Azure Marketplace. Sunil here will be showing a brief demo of Gauntlet later on in today's presentation. We won several awards. We've been recognized by the Cloud Security Alliance, by the TIE Foundation, and we have many customers, including several of them in the healthcare space. And this is a mix of customers who pay us, so as business customers, as well as companies who use our free tools. So we have a free calculator It's called the rubric for CVSS. So the purpose is to evaluate vulnerabilities in security products, in healthcare and medical devices. Basically, there is a generic calculator called CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. But in partnership with the FDA and the MITRE Corporation, we have come up with a rubric for CVSS to apply this scoring methodology and give a rating of 0 through 10 for any vulnerabilities specifically in healthcare and medical devices, taking into consideration patient safety, taking into consideration the privacy and the sensitivity of medical records, health records, and so on. Right, so let's dive right in. Speaking about cybersecurity, I'm estimating that all of you work in some form or the other in the medical industry. So cybersecurity is becoming increasingly important and increasingly mandatory. We've been tracking the FDA's cybersecurity compliance for the past 10 years, and that is something that is a testament to how this is becoming more serious in the industry. About 10 years ago, there were barely a handful, about 12 to 13 security requirements as part of the FDA's cybersecurity guidance. The latest one, which came out a little over a year ago, September of 2023, has 50. So that has bloomed from 10, 11, 12, all the way through 50. And each of these has many sub-requirements. And this makes a lot of sense because we are seeing increasing digitalization when it comes to medical devices and healthcare platforms. Patient safety is extremely important. It's not like having a vulnerability in your, taxi hailing app or any application that you use for playing games and so on. Lives may be at risk when you have a medical device that is not adequately protected from a security point of view. Secondly, this is also important because you need to comply with many of the standards, including the FDA, the CE mark, HIPAA, HITRUST, and so on. Otherwise, this can hurt your business. You may not be able to sell in certain geographies like the United States, in Europe, and so on, unless you meet the regulatory requirements. Financial impact, again, from a business point of view, one, it's you're being a good citizen if you protect the user's data and the users themselves. But more importantly, or equally importantly, from a business perspective, once there is a healthcare data breach or a security breach in your computing platform, it may cost millions of dollars to recover from it. Not to mention the trust, because the healthcare industry, just like the cybersecurity industry, is built on trust. So that's the fundamental bedrock. Once you lose the trust, it gets really difficult to get that back. And not surprisingly, if you look at many of the reports as well as the market studies and research, the cost of a data breach in the healthcare industry is touching almost $10 million per incident. And so we're talking about this research that has been done by the Ponemon Institute and IBM Security, and they publish these reports year over year. And healthcare has been at the top for 3 to 4 years in year over year. So that has been the most expensive when it comes to data breaches and security breaches. So there have been a ton of examples. So there was the Medtronic hack, which is particularly interesting. So this was a case that happened with pacemakers. This is a bit dated, so we intentionally did not want to publish anything that is too recent, unnecessary controversy. But this was an interesting case because the Medtronic pacemaker had a vulnerability. This platform had a vulnerability in the wireless communication, number one. Number two, the encryption was not switched on by default. The absence of the encryption made it easy for an attacker in the same vicinity in order to be able to intercept the traffic, in order to be able to read the traffic. And number three, unfortunately, in this case, they were also able to write to it, which means that an attacker in the vicinity of the victim is able to modify the normal functioning of the pacemaker. And there, it was possible to prevent such an attack, such a cyber attack from happening if the manufacturer had paid attention to regular security testing, what we call as threat modeling, penetration testing, fuzzing, and so on, as well as using adequate encryption or cryptographic measures, one, to protect the confidentiality of the data, and two, to protect the integrity of the data. In some cases, the confidentiality may not matter. For example, when I'm setting the temperature using the thermostat in my house, it doesn't matter for an attacker if an attacker is able to snoop and figure out that the temperature is about 20 degrees centigrade. But what's important is that the value should be protected from tampering. So the attacker should not be able to tamper that value when I'm sending that instruction to the instrument in the house. And the thermostat should only accept parameters from a legitimate device. So the same way, from a pacemaker's perspective, if there is a wireless communication possible between the pacemaker and a controller, you absolutely have to protect the integrity of that information going between the two communicating entities. The cost of non-compliance is also something that is important to keep in mind. So the FDA is becoming increasingly stringent. It's really difficult. We're going to be talking about the pre-market, post-market guidances, and so on. Failure to do so can lead to injunctions. HIPAA is similar. So in fact, they publish what's called as the wall of shame. So you can just Google for it, the HIPAA wall of shame. It displays the offenders, the number of records that have been affected, and a whole ton of information, which can be pretty damaging to the brand and the reputation of the company. And of course, the settlements run into 5-6-figure dollar amounts. So it's very often you can see settlements running into several hundreds of thousands of dollars, very often even millions of dollars. So as you can see, a couple of examples here. The lack of sufficient technical safeguards and the absence of certain good practices when it comes to software and hardware security, cybersecurity. For example, failing to regularly review the source code, failing to understand whether the privacy of medical records is protected. All of that we're missing in some of these products and in some of these applications because of which these guys actually paid out a lot of money. So there is a very steep cost for not handling cybersecurity for your products. So let's look at it from a technical perspective. Usually, if you are an engineer or an architect or an engineering manager, you would be dealing with something like this day in and day out. But even if you're not, the engineering teams within your organization are going to be looking at it from this perspective. Almost all IoT devices, or what we call as Internet of Things, and in this case, we call them IoMT, or Internet of Medical Things, have a blueprint, right? So very often you see the hardware devices, what you see on the lower left-hand side. So we call it the gateway, the node, tags, sensors, what have you. So these are the hardware form factor devices, very often very small, low power, low performance, just enough compute to do the job. The pacemaker is a great example. It could also be activity trackers, breast pumps. It could be like smart rings and so on. These communicate with an application, and usually an application that's sitting on your Android or iOS device, which acts as a local cloud. So that's what you see on the right-hand side. And this communication usually happens over Bluetooth or BLE. Sometimes it may be over Wi-Fi, it may be over NFC and plus, and a host of protocols. And then you have the cloud. And you see cloud to be a very prominent component of most IoT products and definitely in most IoMT products. By cloud, I mean use of third-party hyperscalers like Amazon Cloud, Google, Microsoft Cloud, or it could be a private deployment. Many of the companies have their own data centers and they might have their own deployment. So you have the device, you have the mobile, you have the cloud. And the fourth building block here is really the connectivity tissue. So all of the communication protocols, that could be wired, wireless, and so on. In fact, if you just Google for communication protocols in IoT devices, you see well over 60 to 70 of them. So there are a ton of them, which makes it great when you are working on a new product, you have a lot of choice. But if you're a security person, that's a nightmare. Because who's going to secure all of these? What are the standards? Not surprisingly, each of these building blocks, the 4 building blocks that I talked about, have their own set of security threats and threat surfaces. So when you're talking about the hardware, we just saw the Medtronic hack. We saw that the pacemaker could be hijacked and could lead to lethal conditions and patient safety issues. So very often we talk about what's called a secure boot. secure firmware update, data at rest encryption, isolated memory regions, memory read-write protection, secure debug, and all of these hardware firmware-related security paradigms. Likewise, when we're talking about applications, either on the phone or on the cloud, we talk about application security, privacy, data classification, API security, container and cloud security, and so on. And finally, when you're talking about the wireless protocols, there are certain standards, there are known weaknesses when it comes to Bluetooth and BLE. In fact, my team and I have presented about this at many events and conferences. So if you're using Bluetooth or BLE, there are certain things that you should be aware of, but what it can protect and more importantly, what it cannot. So all of these come into considerations, and these are just the starting points, right? So this is the launch pad for doing the end-to-end security assessments of your hardware and software devices. Speaking of software, I also want to mention what's commonly referred to as SAMD, or software as a medical device. There are more and more platforms today which are solutions that are provided by manufacturers. They don't have a hardware component at all. For example, there could be mobile apps that can take inputs from third-party hardware and that can help diagnose certain medical conditions. There are many companies that now consume imagery and then offer services like early cancer detection, for instance, using AI. So these are extremely advanced, extremely useful tools, pushing the edge, pushing the envelope when it comes to security research and medical research. But then they are acting on highly sensitive patient data. So therefore, security is equally important, even when a hardware device is not involved, because there are attacks against SAMD. So there are many headlines and news articles talking about ransomware attacks, about attacks or data breaches in SAMD providers, causing concerns when it comes to sensitive information exposure. So not surprisingly, again, security for SAMD is just as important as security for hardware devices. So we have a complete end-to-end cycle here. We'll also be touching upon this in our SDLC slide a bit later on. So before that, we also want to talk about compliance. So this is one of the important topics that we have for this presentation. There are many compliance standards, but most importantly, the ones that stand out that is most recognized include the FDA's 510K cybersecurity guidance, and there is also the CE mark, which uses the MDCG, the Medical Device Consumer Group, which defines the cybersecurity guidances, as well as the popular ones such as HIPAA, HITRUST, and so on. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Aishwarya. So she'll be walking us through what the FDA says when it comes to cybersecurity. And if you're on a journey to achieve cybersecurity compliance with the FDA, this is a short teaser on how to do it, how to get started, what to expect, and most importantly, why you should start early. I'm going to hand it over to Aishwarya to take it from here.
Hi everybody, I'm Aishwarya Patel. So I'll be briefing about the FDA, what are the documents that we have to submit and what are the different process we have to go through. Yeah. Just a second. Yeah, I think you can see my screen here.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can see the screen, Aishwarya.
I'll go through this. Yeah, so there are majorly three major categories in the FDA process. One is pre-sub, pre-market, and post-market. So pre-sub is before the formal submission of the documents to the FDA, and it's an early engagement with FDA to get feedback on high-level cybersecurity strategy. And pre-market is before the device is approved for marketing, and it it gives the detailed review of the product design, manufacturing, and clinical data. When it comes to post market, when the product is already being used by the customers and the product is already in the market, so ensuring that continuous oversight of the product safety and effectiveness through the real world performance is important in post market. So what is exactly pre-sub and how it works? So we have to keep majorly some of the components in mind when it comes to pre-sub. One is device design. Ensuring that the device design meets the regulatory requirements is important. And cover letter. Submitting a cover letter for CDRH. CDRH is Center for Device and Radiological Health. So it outlines the purpose of submission. So just like this is the major reason that we have to give for the CDRH through the cover letter. And predicate device concern. This is actually the major step in the whole pre-sub process, proving that predicate device is substantially equivalent, and we to prove that we actually follow 510K. IDE CLIA, and just like that, we even have clinical study design to ensure a robust and a reliable data collection is done. And you can see here, these are some of the sample questions we can ask FDA during our pre-sub process. So these were the questions that they had FDA people have put in the pre-sub document. For example, there is too much process to follow. Do we have to actually follow IDE, CLIA? What type of data has to be submitted? So all these questions can be asked during pre-sub submission. So pre-market, as I already mentioned, before the device is approved for marketing, we have to follow pre-market. So it requires a documentation of risk management and secure development practices. Some of the major process we have to go under in pre-market are investigational device exemption, detailed description of the device, bench testing results, 510K submission. We already know that 510K submission is important because proving that predicate device is substantially equivalent, and proposed labeling, pre-market approval. So if my device comes under class 3 and it's a high risk device, then pre-market approval is important. So that and manufacturing information as well. And what is the exact procedure? What are all the steps we have to follow for 510K? First is identification of the device class code and 510K test requirements, then paying the review fee for the FDA, and then comes preparation and submission of 510K file. Next is providing answers to the FDA questions, and if we follow all of these steps properly, then FDA will give us 510K approval and will get certified. Then FDA also expects some of the important documents that has to be submitted in the pre-market submission. So let's see. Most of the document, it actually expects most of the documents. These are some of the important documents that we have to submit. One is cybersecurity risk assessment documentation, continuous security assurance, SBOM security report, threat modeling documentation. So precisely threat modeling documentation has to be structured in such a way that we are following STIDE and MDIC. Next is cybersecurity management plan, narrative reviewer guide. All these documents has to be submitted to the FDA in pre-market. Next is post-market. So the device is already being used by the customers, and we have to follow certain procedures to make sure it meets the safety and it meets the expectations of the customers. Risk management and quality systems, monitoring and addressing the vulnerabilities, and we have to also make sure that continuous security is provided, vulnerability disclosure and mitigation, FDA reporting requirements. And device is already in the market and I'm using the device. So there is a sudden issue that comes out in that device. So we have to submit two types of documents to the FDA. One is 21 CFR Part 806, 21 CFR Part 803. So these two important procedures has to be followed in FDA reporting requirements. And not just these, if we submit some of the documents, it's just not that. So we have to also follow a particular standard that meets the FDA expectations. So for that, we have to follow NIST cybersecurity framework. Yeah, that was about what is FDA expects and what are the important steps that are there and what type of documents has to be submitted for the FDA. So how Deep Armor can help in every stage of the FDA submission process will be carried out by Sumant. Yeah,
Thank you, Aishwarya.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a really quick summary of the pre-sub, pre-market, and the post-market requirements that the FDA requires product manufacturers and medtech manufacturers to adhere to. Right. So the actual process can take a very long time. We have seen that, especially when it comes to, the pre-sub is more like a precursor to the whole process. So this helps in softening the blow. This helps you to talk to the FDA, ask them questions, which is a great opportunity. You should definitely do that if it comes to the pre-sub stage. So that way you know what to expect and what the FDA wants. But once the pre-market process starts, that's when actual work, begins. At this stage, you're required to do everything from process planning to technical execution of cybersecurity. And by technical execution of cybersecurity, we mean all things related to the product architecture, the design, the implementation, deployment, post-deployment, and maintenance. So that's where you need to have a plan to intercept product lifecycle and security lifecycle. And this is where this can get really tricky. If you look at the 510K cybersecurity guidance, it's a very legal-esque document. Having your engineering team consume that, understand, and implement that can sometimes be tricky. We've gone through several iterations with several customers. We've talked to the FDA. The bottom line is that the FDA also does not have a magic bullet. So there is no formula that you directly apply and then you magically get the approval. You have to go through the process. So you have to go through the process of doing this work, submitting to the FDA, them bouncing back questions, you answering the questions, and eventually you get the approval. So where Deep Armor can help basically is having discussions with your engineering teams so that way we understand your product. We can help you come up with the right set of questions on what you should ask the FDA. For example, the cybersecurity guidances are very different if what you're working on is a class 1 or a class 2 or a class 3 medical device. And by medical device, remember, this is either a hardware-based or an SAMD, a software as a medical device. We can also help you once you go through the pre-sub phase. There's a big set of activities, including the technical execution as well as the document generation. So generating these documents, doing the technical execution, such as threat modeling, identifying security attributes, and performing, the end-to-end attack tree modeling, developing data flow diagrams, all of that, all of those are requirements that you have to submit to the FDA. And very often, once you do that, they're going to come back and ask questions. So providing the clarifications, providing additional technical inputs in order to justify what you've submitted and justify the activities you've executed are sufficient from a security point of view. So in terms of pre-market readiness, I think I've already covered most of it in terms of generating the documents, planning and executing product security assessments, finally, providing support for continuous security assessments. So this is where it blends from pre-market to the post-market. So what it means is that the FDA does not want you to just submit documents once and perform the security activities once and then go away saying that you're cleared, but you're required to continuously comply with the cybersecurity requirements or the guidance. So this is called the post-market. What happens in the post-market phase is that, one, you need to provide proof to the FDA saying that you have the right mechanisms and the bells and whistles in order to implement security on a continuous basis. For instance, your product might be accepting firmware updates over the air. So FDA wants to make sure that all firmware updates will be integrity protected and confidentiality protected if required. Likewise, if you use cloud, for instance, Amazon Cloud, Google Cloud, or Microsoft, they want to make sure that you're taking adequate measures using the right kind of tools, mechanisms, processes, frameworks to make sure that you're protecting the data that's residing in the cloud, your databases, your users, your network configurations, settings, and so on. So all of this comes under post-market guidance, which basically is used by the FDA to make sure that you have a long-term plan when it comes to security and not just a one-time solution. So what should you do in terms of cybersecurity? Right? So this is a five-step process that DPARMA recommends. So different companies do this differently. We have worked with a lot of Fortune 100 companies, and this is what we have filtered out based on what most companies do. Basically, right from program POR, or what's called as the plan of record, so that's when the product or the project gets approved, all the way through design and implementation and launch, deployment, and maintenance, there are certain SDLC activities or security development lifecycle activities. S1 and S2 basically are executed even before you start writing the first line of code. We talk about security architecture reviews, identifying what we call as the key security attributes. What's the trust boundary? What's the adversary profile? What are the assets? What are you trying to protect? What's the ingress and the egress vectors for your product? And what are the objectives? What are the non-objectives? What do you want to protect and what do you not want to protect, or what is out of scope for you? All of this come into the S1. In S2, we talk about threat modeling. So basically using a matrix of security requirements to threats to vulnerability vectors that eventually meet the security objectives defined in S1. So it's really like a waterfall. So the output of S1 helps in doing the S2 activities. And in S3, you start getting into the implementation. So we're talking about code reviews, using tools, using manual methods, as well as keeping your software bill of materials, your SBOM, or your software supply chain up to date. Supply chain security is becoming an increasingly prevalent problem and a big nightmare for many of the companies. We are working with very small healthcare manufacturers, and they have a software bill of material running into several dozens, sometimes like 50, 60, 80, 100 line items in their BOM. And managing the security of such a BOM, a software BOM, can be really, really tricky. So all of this should be included in your plan as part of your S3. S4 is more of the dynamic analysis. So we call it fuzzing and penetration testing. So in this case, when your product is in the wild, in the market, what happens if an attacker or a hacker tries to subvert the normal operations of the product? So we do that under controlled conditions. So we try to simulate what the malicious actors try to do with your product. The pacemaker attack is a good example. So all of that is covered in S4. And in S5, it's basically incident response planning, because you have done everything that you can from S1 to S4, but then it's also prudent to be prepared for security incidents. There is no hardware or software platform that is absolutely free of cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So it's good to be prepared. It's good to have that philosophy. Excuse me. So that way you know what to do when an incident happens and you're prepared to respond, you're prepared to provide the right kind of advisories and inputs to your customers. That's our S1 through S5 process. So what it means from a technical perspective, again, going back to the diagram that I was talking about a few slides ago. So when you're dealing with the building blocks, so that's the device, mobile, cloud, and wireless protocols, it's important that for each of these building blocks, you identify the assets, adversaries, and so on. You perform the threat modeling and risk assessment. You do the data flow diagrams, because all of these, number one, help you in determining the security risks for your platforms. And number two, also generate the documentation that you need to submit to the FDA. So likewise, on the application side, so whether it's the cloud, whether it's the applications or your software bill of material, there are many considerations and many security paradigms. For instance, identity management, data classification, making sure that there are no injection attacks or runtime vulnerabilities in your product. You either solve these through third-party tools or through manual methods. And we also have a quick demonstration of Gauntlet, which can help you in completely automating your cloud infrastructure security, your software bill of materials, and secret scanning, as well as now AI. So if you're using any AI services in cloud, for instance, SageMaker, Bedrock, Kendra, or Azure AI Studio, and so on, Gauntlet is the software platform that we have that helps in completely automating this process. For those templates and demos, I'm going to hand it over to Sunil. So he's going to show us what some of these FDA documentation look like. This is, again, a very brief preview. This is a process that takes several months, but we want to show you what the end result looks like what would the documentation look like? What are some of the, the brief high-level skeletons of these documents? And Sunil will also walk us through a quick demo of Gauntlet that can help you not only in automating cybersecurity for your cloud, but also in meeting compliance with the FDA, with HIPAA, with GDPR, and a bunch of other regulatory requirements. Right. Over to you, Sunil.
Yeah, thank you, Suman. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Till now, we understood what are the FDA requirements, FDA expectations, and how deep armor can help. So let's see what are the template. Let's see what are the documents that we need to submit to FDA in order to get compliant with the FDA compliance. Right now, I'll be showing two templates and the product walkthrough. The first template document is threat model document. Before understanding the threat model document, let's take a small example of the device, hardware product, which consists of cloud, mobile, and the hardware device as the main component. So the threat model document consists of mainly the four sheets or the document. The first one is data flow diagram. Second one is the S1, which Sumant has explained, key security attributes. The third one is the S2, which one is actually a threat model document. And the last one is the strike table, which consists of all the vectors. So the first one is data flow diagram. As the name itself indicates, it mainly talks about how the data flows across the ecosystem. As we have taken ecosystem which consists of cloud, mobile, and hardware, now we will understand the device data flow diagram. It mainly consists of three diagrams. One is high-level diagram, where it talks about how the data flow happens at the high level in the ecosystem. In our case, you can see that the device communicates with the mobile application, and the mobile application talks with the backend servers that are sitting on the cloud. But there is no communication between the device to the cloud. This is the high-level data flow diagram. Whereas the mid-level document, which concentrates on two components, that is device and the iOS application. Here you can see that we are using a BLE protocol to exchange information between the device and the legit application. And here also you can see that the communication can be anything. It can be firmware over there, it can be activity tracker information, application notification, BLE exchange keys, and many more. And also there is a dotted lines here which indicates the trust boundary. The trust boundary indicates that what are the manufacturers actually working on. On the mobile side, the Bluetooth framework, core OS level layers will not be touched by the manufacturer. Only the application will be developed by the manufacturers. So you can see the dotted lines across the application. This indicates these are the trusted boundaries. This is the mid-level data flow diagram. And the last one is low-level data flow diagram for the device, which mainly concentrates on trust boundary and and what are the parts that a manufacturer actually coded or developed. In the device side, the firmware OS, the Bluetooth, how the Bluetooth pairing happens, and the secure storage will come under the trust boundary. Whereas the remaining parts are like they might be taken from the third-party vendors. This is the data flow diagram, which gives a brief understanding on how the ecosystem works and how the data actually flows over the ecosystem. Next comes the SDLC S1 part, which stands for key security attributes. Here, the main goal will be like the security architects or the technical leads will identify the security assets, adversaries, trust boundaries, security objectives, and security non-objectives. As this is a device threat model, security assets for the device will be mainly the firmware part, hardware information, cryptographic keys that are used for BLE network, or even the firmware keys. Whereas adversaries who are attackers who wants actually to steal the security assets. These can be like actual owner of the device. There can be a malware attackers in the vicinity of the device, and also the rogue BLE devices which actually wants to connect to the device, our hardware devices. The entry and exit points, as I already mentioned, BLE is the communication protocol. The BLE communication can be the entry and exit point, as well as the mobile application which talks with the device can be the entry exit points. The security objectives and non-objectives defines what are we trying to achieve here. By defining the security objectives like firmware should not be tampered, integrity protected, and our device should be connected to only the authorized BLE devices, but not the rogue BLE devices. These can be security objectives, and whereas non-objectives can be like ensuring the all third-party security of the third-party vendors. Like if you are directly buying a BLE chip from a vendor, the security of that chip is not under our manufacturer. This is the S1, and S2 is the actual threat model document, which defines mainly the three parts: security requirements, threats, and the vectors. As we already mentioned in the 2023 final guidance provided by the FDA, there are actually 50 security requirements, and for each 50 security requirements, we write the threats and threat vectors for these requirements. Let's take an example of one security requirement provided by the FDA. Sorry, which is ensure a strong authentication mechanism has been implemented. This is one security requirement by the FDA. For this, the threats can be like unauthorized access to the flash memory, eavesdropping over the BLE network, and also the injecting rogue commands to the device to read the sensitive information. These will be the higher level threats, and for each threat, there can be threat vectors. These are the actual test cases that we are going to perform on the device. One example for unauthorized flash memory access is like try to access the sensitive information from the device through the BLE communications or any open ports that are available on the device. This will be the threat vector, and this test vector will be conducted on the device, and it also captures whether this particular vector is pass or fail. If there are any if it is pass, we will mention it as pass. If there are any issues, we will be writing an executive report with the details about the fail cases. And the last column is the stride vectors. As the accessing the sensitive information, this falls under tampering as well as information disclosure. We mark the stride vectors in the last column. In this way, we define threats and vectors for all the security requirements provided by the FDA. If there are any requirements that are not covered by the FDA, DPARMR will be adding those extra security requirements in the threat model document. The last one is stride table, which consists of the test vectors which falls under spoofing, tampering, elevation of privileges, and other stride vectors. So this is all about the threat model document. This is a sample template, but whereas in the real time, it will be a vast document with all the requirements provided by the FDA. We also furnish another document, which we call it as FDA dashboard. This document gives a clear picture on where our security posture stands. So this document contains the 50 security requirements provided by the FDA, and for each security requirement, we provide how many vulnerabilities are there, and what are the positive findings regarding the security requirements, and also we provide the pre we provide the CVSS score rating. If there are any vulnerabilities, we provide what is the issue, what is the severity of this particular issue, and also if there we also give the post mitigation severity score. If the manufacturers provide the fix for these vulnerabilities, at the end we provide the post mitigation severity score and also the severity associated with this. Ideally speaking, the post mitigation severity score, it should be always no risk or acceptable risk. And if there are any issues that we are going to fix after the production, we will mention that at the end. So whenever the FDA folks look into this document, they get a better picture for each requirement, what are the severity associated with it. If there are any requirements which does not have vulnerabilities, we just mention the positive findings, and we also mention that there are no risks associated with this. If any requirements are not applicable, let's say MFA for the devices, we just mention it is not applicable in our product side. This is all about FDA dashboard. And now I will quickly walk you through the Gauntlet product. This is a holistic product which secures your cloud code as well as AI services. This has helped several customers in getting FDA compliance, HIPAA, GDPR, and many other compliance. So it mainly contains the 4 pillars. One is cloud security posture management. The second one is secret scanning. Third one is supply chain security, and the last one is ASPM. In the CSPM, we support the famous cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, and as we all know that with the continuous integration and development, there will be a lot of changes that are happening in the cloud in a daily basis. So we don't know when a cloud misconfiguration happens. So our product will be scanning your cloud infrastructure regularly in a daily basis. We scan up to 2 to 3 times a day on your cloud infrastructure, and we provide these results. If there are any critical alerts, we send an email to the DevOps team so that they can mitigate the issues. This is a multi-cloud and a multi-account support. We also scan all your environments, whether it is development, it is staging, production. We scan and we make sure that you are compliant with the necessary compliance. This gives a better picture on how many critical, high, medium, and low issues present in your cloud. We scan for at least 1,000 plus cases for all the 3 CSPs, AWS, Azure, GCP, and provide this results. And at the bottom, we provide the detailed report on what all the controls that are failing. And we also provide, whenever you click on that particular failed cases, we provide the what are the resources that are failing to be compliant with the controls. And on the right side, we provide the remediation. We also support AI here. If you want a AI-based remediation, we provide that by just clicking on Ask AI. If you want a remediation on the CLI part, if you click CLI, we provide the remediation on how to fix the particular issue through the CLI. We also support Terraform, CloudFormation as well. This is about the CSPM. And also coming to the compliance side, we also support the compliance. If you just click on the compliance and if you want to see how much compliant you are with FDA, you can choose the FDA here, and you will come to know that this particular infra is just 24% compliant with the FDA. There are 187 controls on the FDA, out of which only the 24% are passing. So immediately our DevOps engineer can check this portal and fix all the failed cases to get compliant with the FDA. Here also we get what are the problems with particular FDA controls, and we can work on them. This is all about CSPM, whereas secret scanning and supply chain security as Sumant was mentioning, supply chain security is becoming a huge headache for the manufacturer because we will be using hundreds of third-party libraries in our product. So it is our responsibility that there are no known vulnerabilities in our supply chain. We support mainly GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, AWS Infra, as well as you can manually upload your SBOM. We just integrate with our product with your repositories, and we identify the third-party libraries. We scan them daily. In case if you want to scan them twice or thrice a day, that is also available. If you just click on the library, you will come to know what are the whether it is a malware, are there any exploitability available for this particular SBOM, and what is the CVE for this particular SBOM. In this way, you can see that what are the known vulnerabilities present in your third-party libraries or the SBOM. And also, we regularly scan your code to identify are there any hard-coded secrets, password, AWS keys in your repository. There are chances that we will be sharing our code with third-party vendors, contractors, or even there might be a scenario where few developers will not have access to the privileged AWS, Azure, and all. There are chances that these secrets may leak through the code. So we scan your code daily and we ensure that there are no hard-coded secrets in your code. The last one is ASPM. It stands for AI Security Posture Management. In case if you are using any AI services on the cloud, we will be scanning those AI services. Nowadays, everybody is riding the wave of AI. They are also using AI services provided by the cloud service providers. So we scan your AI services, whether it is AWS, Azure, GCP, and we also provide the results on what are the services which are failing to have the good security configurations. Again, in this case, we provide the results, what's your security score based on the services that you are AI services that you are using on the cloud. At the bottom, we provide the detailed report. And similarly, if you click on this, you will come to know what are the resources that are failing to have a good security configuration. This is all about Gauntlet. As I already mentioned, many of our customers are actively using this product and they are getting their compliance check every day, and they are getting compliance certificate also. Here in the compliance section, we can even download the PDF, and this can be submitted to the FDA to get the FDA certification. And now Sumant will be talking about a few of our customer case studies and handing it to you.
Thank you, Sunil. So I think we just have a couple of minutes left. So I'll be talking about a couple of case studies. One is on the whole product security and FDA compliance part. This was a customer that is currently based out of California. So we have worked with them on multiple products and platforms. The objective was that this customer came to us. They were looking for help for basically understanding what the FDA is asking, what HIPAA is asking, and also to make sure that we provide them with adequate support for continuous security compliance. So for this customer, we did the end-to-end planning and execution, including threat modeling, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, documentation, which they submitted to the FDA. And we successfully led them through the approval process for 3 of their products. And they were really happy. They've said some really nice words about what we've done. And as part of this program, we also worked with the FDA on the MDDT program. So if you just Google rubric for CVSS, you're going to be seeing the link for the CVSS calculator. It's absolutely free. There is no charge for using it. We have many big MedTech companies using it as well. In fact, Sunil, if you can paste the link in the chat window, that would be great. So we strongly encourage MedTech companies as well as healthcare companies to use it. So that way you provide the feedback and we make it better for the rest of the world. On Gauntlet side, we have Movano. It's a healthcare company, makers of Class 2 medical devices based out of California again. And they've been using Gauntlet now for almost 18 months. They have been clearly happy with it. Gauntlet, as they have said, gives them clear actionable issues. They have addressed several dozens of critical as well as high-rated vulnerabilities. And Gauntlet has effectively stopped security breaches many, many times for Movano. And as a further kicker, so it has also helped them in maintaining the 510K post-market guidance, as well as GDPR and HIPAA. So not only has it helped in preventing security attacks, but it also helped them in meeting security compliances and requirements from across the world. So as a closing remark, so if you offer any healthcare platforms, either hardware-based or medical devices that are software-based, as an exclusive offering through MassMedic, we are offering a free 45-minute consultation. We can help in planning your cybersecurity strategy, and if you as well as a subsequent activity. And if you use cloud, and today Gauntlet supports AWS, Azure, and GCP, you can try Gauntlet absolutely free. There's no obligation to purchase. You can use it for identifying security vulnerabilities in your cloud, in your code, as well as in your software supply chain. And through Gauntlet, you're going to get the FDA 21 CFR, GDPR, HIPAA, and a host of other compliances, including SOC 2, PCI DSS, FedRAMP, and a bunch of others. So do reach out to us through this email address, and we'd be happy to have you try out Gauntlet absolutely for free. Right, so we just have about a couple of minutes. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. You can either post them in the window or post them in the Q&A in Zoom. By the way, the slides will be shared with everyone after the session. So that way, if there is anything that you want to revisit or you want the details to reach out to us, that will be there in the slide deck. And we have about half a minute left, so I'm going to hand it over back to Nicole. And so I think there's one question. The FDA control requirements are listed in the FDA pre-market guidance. That's correct. So the FDA cybersecurity requirements are in the pre-market guidance. Just so you know, the pre-market or the 510K process is not only for cybersecurity, it also includes a whole bunch of other things. What we talked about in this session is only all things relevant to cybersecurity. But yes, the security control requirements are listed in the 510K pre-market guidance. And we're at the top of the hour, so I'll hand it over to Nicole. If there are any questions at all, so you will have our contact information in the slides. So please do reach out to us and we'd be happy to answer them. Over to you, Nicole.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. So much great information. Thank you to Deep Armor for hosting today's conversation. We cannot put on these great programs without support from members like you, so thank you. And thank you to all of you who joined us live today. I encourage you to go to massmedic.com and check out all the other great events we have coming up. We do these webinars almost weekly, so see what else we have coming up on the calendar. And have a great day. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.